Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Jenny Dietrich.
And Jenny, you're a little under the weather today, so
Yeah.
we're gonna try to plow through this, but I
Yes,
appreciate you.
this has been a rough couple of weeks. Whew.
I'm glad that you have enough of a voice to actually, participate in
Yeah,
this
I
at
had to
least.
cancel LinkedIn Live with Martin Waxman and Deidre Breckenridge last week because I got on and they were like, "Yeah, nope, it was not happening."
Well, that is commitment, and I do appreciate it. And today we're gonna talk about the latest quarterly SAGA owner survey that we had out in the field in March, and so we've now got the opportunity to take a look and see what the results are. And so this particular survey had the usual quarterly outlook questions: where do people see things headed? How satisfied are they with their agency? But then we also took a deep dive this quarter on looking at last year's performance. And I think the headline really was that it was sort of a mixed bag for agencies last year. There was no clear trend as far as up or down. It was roughly evenly split amongst the respondents as far as who had good years and who had bad years. But there's a lot of other nuggets in there that I think we can dig into as well.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I always think it's interesting to see the quarterly report just because it's good to get a sort of pulse on what we see as well and what we're hearing, and I think it validated much of what we're hearing and what we're seeing. I do find it interesting that there was such a mixed bag of responses this quarter, which doesn't typically happen. Um, so it's curious if it's industry related or if it's service related. But it was a pretty good mixed bag, which was interesting in and of itself.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, overall, if we look at sort of the outlook piece of the puzzle, it's fairly consistent with where it's been for the last year, which is
Yep.
sort of cautious optimism, mediocre satisfaction, but, no great angst at the moment. It's a little bit of a, kind of a cautious optimism, I guess, really is the way that I kind of keep describing it. And so we've been in a very tight range for the last year from that standpoint as far as outlook on things. We did have some questions in there about some specific concerns that folks might have, particularly around the economy and government policy and some of the international trade issues that have cropped up. And I
Tariffs and
think the
things.
headline for me out of that is that there is significant concern, particularly over the economic conditions and whether that may impact their agency this year, much less so on the international side, which is probably indicative of the fact that many of the agencies that responded were not involved in any kind of international business of a significant kind, and so therefore they're less concerned about that impact on their business, at least at the moment. And obviously we know that international policy can certainly bleed over and affect domestic politics as well.
Yeah, and there was some stuff in there about the tariffs too, and how that's affecting some. I think there was a number of like one business owner specifically said it had affected their business by 40%, which is significant. So I think again, it's industry related, it's services related. We have to this is why diversification is so important.
Right. Well, and I think that some of those things are a really good reminder that it is certainly helpful to be looking at the big picture, and it's something that I always want to do. But at the same time, it is important to realize and recognize that the circumstances for every agency are very different. Because their clients are different, that where they are is different. And so, we're going to look here at the big trends, but, you may or may not see some of these same things in your own agency business because your situation is entirely different from everyone else.
Yeah, I think there were a couple other things that were really interesting to me. No mergers and acquisitions, which I think is interesting. Nobody's thinking about selling or buying another agency or merging with another agency. I thought that was pretty interesting. Um, the
Yeah, I
number
mean, I
of
think that there were
clients.
people who were curious, but very few took any steps at all in that direction. I was comforted, though, that very few agency owners said that they were relying on a sale of their agency as an outcome for their own personal financial situation. And so that, to me, that was heartening because I have so many conversations with agency owners where I have to explain to them that they just don't have a business that is likely to be sellable for any significant amount of money.
Right.
And that is true. The vast majority of agency owners are never going to sell for something that is really going to make a major difference to their personal financial outlook, their retirement plans, that kind of stuff. And so the fact that people weren't saying, yes, I have to do this in order to survive, made me feel better, right? And so the vast majority of people who are thinking about potentially selling look at it as gravy and not to put food on the table.
Yeah, that was super interesting. I also thought the number of clients, I can't put my fingers on it right at this exact moment, but here it is. The client base for agencies is generally small, with having 10 or fewer clients, and the majority serving 30 or fewer. Even 30 clients, I think it's a lot of clients.
Well, but keep in mind that that's also total over the course of the year, so it's not necessarily at one time.
Okay.
And
right.
So for agencies that are doing project work, and we did see in this that project work is a substantial percentage of the revenue for many of these agencies. If you're doing a lot of project work, then you can certainly see those numbers creep up, right? So if you're doing a lot of 1 or 2 month projects, then you could easily only have a half dozen clients at any given time, but still get to 25 clients over the course of the year, just because of the way it's all structured. But I think it was a good confirmation that the vast majority of agencies are not having dozens of clients, and so it gives us more ammunition when we talk on this show and elsewhere with agency owners or about agency owners. We say, look, you don't need 50, 60, 100 clients. You really need a relatively small number at any given time in order to be successful.
Yeah, that's why I always love the emails that I get. They're like, we can get you 60 sales calls a month. I'm like, geez, I would die.
Right.
I don't want 60 sales calls a month.
No, and it's, I mean, and if you're having that many and still only having 20 or 30 clients over the course of the year, then something would be wildly wrong. You shouldn't be doing 30 new business calls a month and only having 30 clients over the course of the year. So, just further ammunition to hit delete every time you see one of those
just
absolutely stupid emails. But I touched on it briefly, but project revenue is a significant piece of the puzzle for most agencies. And I know in my conversations with agency owners, a lot of them sort of turn their nose down at project work. And we really need to focus on retainer revenue, recurring revenue, that sort of thing. And by the way, I really wish that agency owners would not use the term monthly recurring revenue, because that's a software term. I saw this. There was a discussion on LinkedIn about this, which I think was spot on. Don't go grabbing terms from other industries and misusing them, because it is something that is very different, and it's not nearly as magical as it sounds, or as magical it is if you are in software as a service, for example, where MRR is absolutely the lifeblood of those businesses and useful to them. It's not quite the same for agencies, and I think particularly in the environment we're in. In fact, I just got a note from an agency owner last night who said, they're actually looking at doing more project work because that's what works in the current environment, which is something we have been harping on for a long time, particularly any period of uncertainty. Yes, project work. But project work, in my view, it's essential to the success of any agency. You should never be completely dependent upon retainer work, because there are so many benefits to doing project work, whether that's experimenting in new industries, doing different kinds of work, diversifying some of your income stream, testing new pricing models. There are a lot of benefits to project work, not just in uncertain times, but particularly now we're seeing that it is a good chunk of the pie for a number of agencies.
Yeah, yes. I mean, we've talked about that ad nauseum, and it's true. And we've talked about diversification too, and that helps with your diversification. So don't turn your nose down to project work at all.
Right. And when it comes to winning that new work, the vast majority of these agencies aren't adding a whole lot of new clients on an annual basis. Last year, half of the agencies found 5 or fewer new clients. I mean, which makes sense. And that's what we consistently say, that somewhere in that handful of new clients every year is probably what most of you should be shooting for. And so it isn't a volume game. And when you're thinking about what you're doing from an outreach perspective and from a marketing perspective for your agency, it's really about the quality, not the quantity. And so, I think that this survey just reinforces that point yet again.
Yeah, it's kind of like I say to friends all the time. I'm like, would you rather have 10 $2,500 a month clients or two? Like it's much easier to manage larger clients and less of them than a whole bunch of tiny ones.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing is we did ask for freeform comments from folks, and so there were a lot of little nuggets
They are great.
in there. I think some of them highlight some bigger picture things. Where one of the comments said that the first half of last year was great and the second half sucked. And I think that that's one of the things we need to remember is this survey looked at the entirety of the year, but that doesn't, plenty of agencies may have made their year in the first quarter and then it went downhill from there. Others may have had a rebound towards the end of the year. And particularly where we're seeing this real balance between agencies who had growth and those who shrunk, that it is going to be different for different firms. But I think that if I had to summarize based on what I'm hearing outside of the survey, I would say in general the second half was not softer, but I think there were more flags that popped up, particularly towards the end of the year. And obviously, I think as we start this year, many of the agencies I'm talking with are having concerns just generally about where things are headed.
Sure. Well, yeah, absolutely. I've said this before, but I think one of the biggest mistakes that I personally made during the Great Recession is I ignored all the signs because I was so naive and I didn't really understand how it would affect my business. And so paying attention to what's happening, certainly inside the country, paying attention to what's happening globally, paying attention to all of the executive orders that are happening, like these things are going to affect the business. And it's going to affect some of you more than others, depending on what kind of work that you do. But you have to pay attention to what's happening at a macroeconomic level so that you understand what's going to happen to your business.
Well, I think it has a psychological impact as well, not just on the individual
Sure.
owners,
Yeah.
but also on clients, right? And so
Sure.
when you are in a situation where you put on the news and every day it's just piles and piles of bad news or chaos or concern or those kinds of things, that bleeds over and it does impact how people make decisions. And I would say that it's important to recognize all those things and be aware of all those things. At the same time, you can't let it consume you. And so, while there are concerns that are raised by this survey, it also shows that a lot of agencies are being able to move through them or feel like they will be able to move through them. And you have to have that mindset. If you have the mindset that, it's just everything's going to hell in a handbasket, and there's nothing you can do about it, that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so, I'm not suggesting you stick your head in the sand and ignore all these things, but at the same time, you've got to focus on, okay, all of these things are happening. I have all of these challenges. How do I keep moving forward? How do I work with my team to keep moving forward? How do I help my clients to move forward? Because that's necessary if you want to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, do not do don't stick your head in the sand, but also don't let it completely overwhelm you so that you can't get anything done. I think is a good takeaway there.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to understand that despite the struggles, a lot of folks are doing well, which means you can too. And so you should take hope from that. Some of the comments that we got in the survey from folks who had good years last year. They talk about going in the right direction. Their profitability is improving. They managed to work through even losing a big client because there were other things that made up for it. And so when you see those things, that's heartening. And I would encourage you, if you had a rough year, if you're concerned about this year, look at the survey results and see that there is hope there. And that I'm particularly heartened by the ones who say, we had this speed bump, but we got through it. And it's an absolute reminder that you can do that and should try to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's also a good time that if revenue is down and you're kind of struggling, this is a good time to
start to market your agency, start to do your own thought leadership, start to do the things that you would do for clients to help your business stay afloat and build awareness and stay top of mind, because this is a good time to do that kind of stuff too. It doesn't pay the bills necessarily right in this exact moment, but it does have the long tail effect.
Yep. One other thing I would note is that asking folks to describe their outlook for the year. So obviously we do a lot of numerical assessments of these in the surveys, but in this case we ask for sort of open-ended responses. How do you see the year shaping up? And I would say that in there is where we saw a number of folks expressing the concerns about the broader economy, expressing concerns about the impact of government policy, as you say, some indicating that they've already lost revenue either because of some of the tariff policies or other government policies. And frankly, when this survey went out into the field in late February, early March, a lot of those cuts were still not in effect here in the U.S. And so, there is more to come for more agencies in that regard as the NGOs or even private businesses that they're doing work with feel the impact of these either directly or because they're rumored. And so businesses I've talked with a number of business leaders outside of the agency world who are like, we just don't know what's going to happen. We know that there's talk of these things happening. So we have to be really careful. We have to husband our cash in order to be able to be in a position to deal with some of these things if they happen. And so agencies will undoubtedly feel that even more than they already have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just smart to pay attention. It'll definitely be interesting to see what the Q2 survey brings, but you do have to be prepared. You have to not stick your head in the sand. You have to understand, but you also have to continue to move forward. So do the best that you can do. It's all that we can do.
That is absolutely all that we can do. But there are all sorts of these nuggets in there, and so I would certainly encourage you, if you are interested in learning more about how your peers have been performing, what insights they have to share with you, you can go to the SAGA website and get a free copy of this so that you can dig into all of that data yourself. And we certainly appreciate all of the agency owners who have taken the time to participate in these surveys. Will continue to participate in these surveys because I know that we love to see hard data in addition to all of the anecdotal things that we share with you week in and week out. And particularly when that anecdotal data is backed up by the hard data, so that we don't look quite as crazy as we might otherwise. So any other parting words on this quarter's survey before we
I just thought
give your voice a rest?
The owner or the comments, the freeform comments were my favorite part. So download it just so you can see some of them because it's an entertaining read.
Yeah, and I do try to include as many of the freeform comments as I can, as long as they are, not giving away too much or those sorts of things. Because a lot of folks are very candid, which I appreciate, and it's great intel. But at the same time, I want to be cautious about how much we share of that publicly.
Yes.
But there is certainly a lot of stuff in there that I think will resonate with a lot of you and may also spur you to do some additional thinking. There are comments in there around AI, for example, in addition to economic stuff. So there's all sorts of things in there that I think you might find of value.
Cool. Well, yep, download it. Take a look.
So with that, we will draw to an end this episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
I'm Gini Dietrich.
And it depends.